Hey, I'm Anya, realtor with Bosley Real Estate and host of Who's in My House, the Toronto Real Estate podcast with honest conversations and expert perspectives. Let's see who's in my house today. Okay, today in my house we have Karen Yolevski, the CEO of Carson Dunlop, which is, I would say, one of Ontario's leading home inspection companies. Is that
Absolutely, yes.
all right?
Yes.
Do you want to give us a little background on yourself? I think this is a newer role for you.
It is for sure. First, thanks for having me. It's always great to do something like this. And it is a newer role for me. So I've been heading up Carson Dunlop since the beginning of this year, so January 2025. Previous to that, I was at Royal LePage, working within their corporate brokerages. So in the trenches, in the real estate space, so to speak, with realtors who were trading. And prior to that, I've worked my way through a bit of this space. I've done some work in title insurance, appraisal management. So it's definitely a passion of mine. And I'm excited to chat today a little bit more about all things inspection, the market, wherever we go.
Yeah, so you really have like a broad scope of knowledge within all aspects of real estate. And was it typically in a management role that you were working?
Yeah, so at LePage, I was a COO of the corporate brokerages, and I've headed up business development at Stewart Title. So on the management side, working alongside practitioners, I would phrase it like that. So realtors as clients in my last role, and now also realtors as clients in the Carson Dunlop role, because as we both know, realtors are typically the connection point between the consumer and the inspection process.
Yeah, and just a question that's occurred to me, like what enticed you to make the move specifically to like the inspection space?
Yeah. Carson Dunlop was at a really interesting time, a real transformative time, and that's been a running theme for me in my career in the last number of years. Businesses that are looking at making changes, looking at innovation. Carson Dunlop, a wonderful company with an excellent reputation built up over the years through Alan Carson, who was the founder. However, Alan sold the company, and it was purchased by the Cooperators Group, so the big insurance company that we all know.
Okay, interesting.
And with that comes a renewed vision for the company, a renewed vision for what the inspection space means. It's not just about buying and selling homes. We really see ourselves as a true partner to the consumer throughout their home ownership journey. So that excited me, and I saw a lot of opportunity and potential in the business and the ability to really build this out into something almost a 2.0 of what you'd expect from an inspection company.
Well, it's definitely interesting hearing your that backstory, because that's not necessarily super public knowledge or common knowledge. I had heard that Carson Dunlop was sold, or was purchased rather, but I didn't know much of the details on new vision, anything like that. So it's definitely cool to hear, because I do often use Carson Dunlop for home inspections with my own clients. So very cool. I would love to get into the nitty-gritty about all things inspection.
Sure.
So what do you feel is the main purpose of an inspection?
So the inspection is a point-in-time process that is meant to provide information and education. It's really an educational experience, regardless of whether you're a seller who's prepping your home for sale, or if you're a buyer and you're committed to a home and you're looking to ensure that this home doesn't contain any major deal breaker surprises, things like that.
Yeah.
People often think of an inspection as sort of a pass-fail scenario, and it's the opposite of that.
I agree,
it's not a pass-fail. It is information about a home that allows you to action that information when the time makes sense, and to ensure that you have a greater understanding of your home, not just for what might be wrong with it, and I say that sort of in quotations, but also how to maintain it, what's coming up, like what home ownership looks like. And I know we'll probably dive into that a bit today, but that's a big part of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, huge home inspection misconception is that the purpose of an inspection is, either, like you said, pass fail, or as simple as we're going to do the inspection speaking as the buyer, and we're going to get money from the sellers. It's almost become a negotiation point where buyers will, and I've actually heard of realtors doing this, where they'll encourage their buyers to spend a little bit more to get the property, with the promise that they will negotiate the price down once the inspection comes through. A little dicey, in my opinion.
Dangerous
game. Because what if it comes back and it's like actually totally fine? What are you going to do?
And what if the seller says no?
Yeah.
Right. And
There's
what if
no
you
guarantee.
still want the home as a consumer, and now you've in your mind overpaid and will still have to maybe make some repairs depending on what the report says.
Well, I've heard that there have been some RICO complaints with that kind of topic. And I know you mentioned, inspections, whether it's a seller prepping their home or a buyer who's purchased conditionally. Are there any big differences between a pre-list inspection, which is for a seller, or a buyer's inspection?
The inspection process is essentially identical. What the inspector might say to that consumer in the moment might be a bit different, because a seller has different motivations than a buyer, right? A seller is looking to have this inspection as part of that pre-due diligence before they list the home. They maybe aren't as concerned about where the furnace filter is anymore because they're going to sell that property. Whereas a buyer, it really is for bang for the buck, educational dollars spent. One of the best things you can do is walk through that home with your inspector so you really understand it, because otherwise you're going to walk into that house 60, 90 days later, you're the owner. You might not know how things work, right? Totally. You might know where things are. Where's your electrical panel, right?
Yep.
That is some of the stuff that's covered by an inspection. So you've got the same type of inspection, the same systems being inspected, but the purpose and that interaction is what is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, I hear you. So when a seller does a pre-list inspection, which is something that I often recommend doing, especially in Toronto, where at least I'd say at this point 50% of homes are listed, they're underpriced with an offer date. Mm-hmm. The sellers and the listing agent are hoping to get multiple offers, ideally firm offers, mm-hmm. meaning no conditions. And I just simply cannot understand when people list their homes in that scenario expecting firm offers and don't do a pre-list inspection. Because how can I, as the buyer's representative, advise them to purchase a home that they have literally no information about? I can't in good conscience do that. And I actually just ran into that this week, where I ended up in a bidding war for a 70s home, mm-hmm. and we'll get into that later. Yes. It was a 70s bungalow, and there were 12 offers, no pre-list inspection. Mm-hmm. And we were the top offer until one decided to take out their inspection condition. And the seller went for it because she was older. She didn't want to have to deal with a conditional period if she mm-hmm. didn't have to. But I can't understand how those buyers are comfortable proceeding with a purchase with no information. I mean, I looked at that electrical panel and it was bad. That electrical panel has not been touched since the house was built. Yeah. And the buyers probably have no idea what they're walking into.
That's the unfortunate outcome, right? Yeah. And it's hard because the buyer emotionally can be tied to the house, but it is the biggest investment that a buyer is going to make in their lifetime. Yeah. And theoretically, that buyer would know more about the washer or dryer they're going to buy after closing than they're going to know about their actual house. And that is problematic. So, of course, we recommend the pre-listing inspection, especially in that scenario. Paint the picture, right? Yeah. You want to have negotiations over the house. You want to see people competing for the house. Give them everything they need to do that, especially in this market where there's enough uncertainty in the background that people are nervous. So take away some of that nervousness, that uncertainty. It makes sense. I mean, we saw, if you go back a few years when almost everything was going to bidding war, mm-hmm. that people were still trying to get inspections. They just had to, invest dollars, even if they weren't sure they were going to get the house.
Yeah, I've done that.
Right? If you really are serious about purchasing the house and you're putting your best foot forward on the offer, it makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense. So a lot of that, hurry up, we've got a 3-day window, let's get in there, let's get an inspection. I mean, so much of that can be solved if the seller's agent is willing to provide that information. Yeah. But in cases where they're not, it really is a massive leap that the buyer is taking without a report.
It is. And there's so much about it that makes me nervous, because I've seen deals where they've fallen through on inspection. I've seen, like you just don't know. And you're not, we're not in a city where the majority of the homes were built 2 years ago and they're all brand new.
Right.
And we have all the answers. They're under Tarion warranty. We have such a vast range of ages. Right. Each age category comes with its own problems. Neighborhoods, like you are buying a home that has been lived in, and if you don't have the information, like it's not really something that's very responsible as a homeowner or a future homeowner to do, because so I've been in my house for, it'll be 5 years in December, and I still have the inspection report upstairs in my office, and every once in a while I'm like, wait, how old is the roof again? And I like go and I skim through, because I want to know when I need to be ready to replace the roof.
That's right. And that's another value add of the actual inspection, right? That coming back to it and knowing that this document, this was impartial, it was unbiased. It is going to tell me good information about my home. How old is that roof again? When did they recommend I replace it? Okay, now I kind of can plan, right? I'm like, houses we know today are so expensive. Yeah. People really need to budget and take into consideration the maintenance cost of homes. So knowing when a big ticket item like a roof is going to likely start to cause you some issues, very, very valuable information, really helpful in terms of that cost of ownership. And there's so much focus around purchasing, which makes sense. The hardest part of the transaction is getting that down payment, making the purchase. Yeah. But the cost of home ownership, also high cost.
Yeah, it's not insignificant.
Exactly.
Yeah, you really never know. And so on the topic of investment, I know you mentioned it's one of the best investments you can make. Can you just explain, like, what is a typical cost range for a home inspection?
Yeah, so depending on exactly what's tested, there's a few add-on tests depending on the type of home. You might want to, be a little more concerned looking for mold as an example. But by and large, let's take your average bungalow. We talked already about a bungalow. We'll probably talk about that 70s bungalow again. Let's assume it's 2,500 square feet or under. It's probably going to cost you about $600 to inspect that home. So one of the less expensive parts of buying a home, it's, less than land transfer tax, less than the legal cost, less than lots of the other costs associated with it. And again, the peace of mind. So that's another important part. People hear this and go, is this some big scary thing that's going to cost me thousands of dollars? No, it's typically not. I mean, maybe if you're buying a house in the bridle path, but if you're buying a typical Toronto home, it's a reasonably cost peace of mind component to the purchase.
Well, interestingly enough, it's like you said, it's not substantial compared to some of the other costs that you will incur when buying a home, but it is actually one of the top things that I'll have buyers be taken aback on when they hear the cost, because I think that there's some perception that it's like a couple $100, but then they see, it's $600, $700, $800, depending on add-ons. I had a client, I felt so terribly for them because we ended up in a situation. So first there was a house with an offer date, no pre-list inspection. So we do an inspection. Was not with Carson Dunlop. Didn't get the house. Okay. Next house, we offer on, we get it conditional. They've decided, okay, we want to go with Carson Dunlop. So we do our inspection, and this house was like an old, like Italian family had lived there. So there was not one, not two, but 3 kitchens. 2 kitchens in the basement, 1 kitchen upstairs. Very typical multi-generational living, and like Italian, Portuguese families, a lot of like cooking is done downstairs. So there's a fee depending on the number of kitchens. And that really rode the cost up. So I think it ended up being, and we did some add-ons, so it was somewhere around $900, I want to say. And we're at the inspection. There was a train track behind the house.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you know where I'm going. And everything was for the most part fine. There were some cracks in the floor that were kind of like, maybe there's a foundational issue here. The home inspector was a little bit weary. And we didn't know what kind of train ran back there. So the train goes by while we're at the inspection. The entire house shakes. And everyone's face went like, and that was it. I mean, there were a lot of concerns with like what kind of impact the shaking from the train could have on the foundation, what kind of impact it's had already. And that was just not something that they were comfortable with.
Sure.
And so they ended up again, like now second inspection they've done, didn't get the house. This time, of course, it was their decision though. And then we ended up finally getting the house, like another house.
Yes.
And in the end, they didn't have regrets as to how much they spent on the inspections, because if they didn't, maybe they wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And it sucks. It sucks when you spend the money and you don't get the house, but it's such an important investment. It's just like the risk that you walk into without doing an inspection is just not worth it, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I mean, the story touches on so many aspects, right? First, buying a home is so emotionally charged. So it's easy to look at the disappointment of that sort of story and feel additionally burned, let's say, by having to have spent money and then not get the house, because that, for sure, that person or that couple, they had started to see their life in that house, right? They were cooking in that basement, they were setting up a nursery, they were doing whatever they were doing, and then something happened where it wasn't going to be the house for them. But when you step back from it and you think about it, once the emotional aspect has dissipated, would you have wanted to spend, let's say 1.5, I'm guessing, on a house where it wasn't really the house for you? And had you not spent the $900, you would have done that, right? They would have been in the house, and then you would have been in for window upgrades, insulation upgrades, and you still have that house vibrating. Like, that's what a train does. So it's just one of, and it's okay. Sometimes that's a trade-off and people are okay with it. But for that family, that wasn't going to be a good trade-off. So I think it's often one of the hardest jobs from a realtor perspective, one of the hardest jobs of the realtor, to help the client set the emotional part aside and help them make a good long-term decision. So kudos to you for helping your client through that situation, because that's a hard one. 3 houses until you get the one you want. It's emotionally trying.
It's emotional, and it's hard not to, there's a saying that we have at my brokerage, getting in the boat. Like, you don't want to get in the boat, because as soon as you get emotional, like, my role is to be my client's rock. I am there to guide you through the process. And if I now get into the emotion boat with you, then how can I be impartial? And how can I give you a true, honest opinion when now I'm emotional as well? And it's hard. Like, that's one of the biggest challenges of the job, not getting emotional and not getting frustrated when things don't go well, or being sad. Like, don't get me wrong, when my clients lose out on an offer, like, I'm sad for them, because I know they're sad, but I still have to be able to, turn around, and instead of being like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, like, we're never going to find a house, because that's probably what they're thinking, and be like, this is the house, we lost the house, we're never going to get another house, it's not, like, it's terrible. I have to be able to, say, onwards and upwards, this wasn't the one for you, we're going to find the house for you is out there, and we will find it.
Exactly. It is so easy. And we saw so much of that now. We're seeing a little bit less of it, although in Toronto it's still very prevalent. But if you go back to COVID times, it really did feel like that for so many people. There's not going to be a house for me. I'm never going to win one of these homes. And all I want to do is win, was so much of the sentiment from consumers. And what a job for the realtor to have to unpack that and see through it and get the consumer to a point where they're still making a sound decision that's right for them and their family for probably the next 5 to 10 years. Like, it's very difficult. And as you said, you get very emotionally tied. You are in the boat. It's also your livelihood. I mean, the realtor livelihood is fascinating, because there can be so much sunk cost without a guarantee of any return, right? And people forget that about realtors.
Yeah. I had a conversation recently with a prospective seller, and he was asking me, we kind of touched on like the peak of the market, 21, 22. And he was saying, like, man, you must miss that. Like, that was probably the best time. And I was like, absolutely not. I hated it. It was awful. And I think the perception from the consumer for that, it, like, they think, well, it was so busy, so you were just like banging out deals and it was great. And I was like, I was watching my clients lose out on 7, 8, 9 offers. I was watching their heartbreak every time. I was like, that was not a good time for me. I did not like that. Sure. I mean, on the selling side, it's like it was easier. There was a lot less that had to go into it, but it was hard and it was frustrating for me, and I was tired. Like, I much prefer this point now because a core part of the job as a realtor is negotiating. And in that time, there was very little negotiation happening. We were like, buyers agents were doing whatever they could to get their offer to stick. Selling agents were doing whatever they could to maximize the sale price. But now there's more of a dance.
Yes.
Same thing with the inspection. We do the inspection. Maybe there's some renegotiation on something that we need to fix. There's that dance again, and that's part of what I love about the job. So I definitely, I mean, personally, I prefer this time.
I think it's better for all. I think it's better for consumers. I think it's better for the marketplace. It's a bit of a reset, which is helping,
it was not
particularly first-time buyers. And it's certainly good for due diligence. So when you talk about something like an inspection, we are seeing more balance in the market. We are seeing buyers get inspections, which is great, because we've already said how unfortunate to make such an investment and not really know what you're getting and not get that education. We're also seeing sellers, though, go through more of a robust prepare for market, which is really nice to see as well. I mean, I spent a lot of time in my previous life talking about realtors and how can they bring more success to their businesses, and how do you safeguard your businesses from pitfalls that exist, right? Time lost. Talk a lot about things like buyer rep agreements and things in my previous life. But in this life, to me, the pre-listing inspection, that's clarity. That's deal certainty. If you want a deal, particularly in this market where consumers have more choice, there's more listings on the market. Why would you leave it to chance as to what is going to come out about a home down the road once it's been on the market potentially 6, 8, 12 weeks? And then to hear, oh, maybe something about our pricing strategy was off because we didn't realize X about a home. So I think there's so much utility in the clarity and certainty that an inspection can bring to the sales process.
Absolutely. And it also takes away a little bit of risk for the seller, because they know walking into it, what are the issues that I'm going to have to deal with? Maybe these are some issues we can deal with before listing, and that way we don't have that worry. But also, it takes away the risk of a buyer walking out on the inspection. And I had a deal where, we were really struggling to sell. We were on the market for a while. We finally get an offer, conditional on inspection. They do the inspection. My clients say that the inspector shows up, like, not in a uniform, no logo on the car. So we're like, okay, who knows? Like, could some inspection companies don't have, like,
that's right,
the outfit, the logos, whatever. But regardless, they said it looked a little bit suspicious. Like, it he didn't come with, like, equipment that an inspector would normally have.
That would be a red flag.
Something like that. So anyways, inspection gets done. Agent calls me and says, I don't think it's going to work. I was like, why? What happened? He goes, well, there's so much mold in the basement. The basement is the wet. He literally says, the inspector said this is the most wet basement he's ever seen. And I was like, well, that's just simply impossible, because I've been in that basement 20 times. It does not smell like mold. It is not musty. It is not wet. The house is waterproofed. So, like, explain to me, what do you mean? And he goes, well, there was this and that. Like, he's walking me through this whole thing and this whole story about how there's just all of this mold. And I was like, there isn't, though. So I said to him, like, send me that page of the inspection. I didn't pay for the inspection. I'm not entitled to the inspection. So I'm not expecting you to send me the whole report. But send me the page that you're referring to. Maybe we can deal with this problem. Maybe we can remediate the issue. And he was like, no. Never sent it to me. Just sent me a mutual release. No further conversation. It was clear that they got cold feet and they wanted to back out, because that day I had Carson Dunlop send an inspector. We did an inspection. I bought a moisture meter. I go down there with my own. I check with my own eyes. Dry as a bone. And that is if that's not a selling point to a seller, as to why you should be doing a pre-list inspection, I don't know what else is.
Exactly. And that, for sure, that's the story of cold feet, which, is not the reason for conditions, but
Absolutely.
on occasion, we do see that happen.
We do see it happen, though technically you can't back out of a condition just because you changed your mind. You have to have not fulfilled the condition. But
yes, there's a bad faith argument in that.
There is.
Sure, you've seen and most see from a consumer perspective, the last thing you want is to tie up a home that someone's looking to sell in a lawsuit. So people just say, all right, we're going to move on. We're going to relist. We're going to get this house sold to someone who is going to proceed with the deal. But the frustration level is just through the roof.
I was a mess. And the inspection did end up finding some mold in the attic, which we then remediated. We're able to provide an inspection to the buyers. And in the end, we relisted, we lowered the price. We relisted, got multiple offers and sold for more than what we were listed at. So it ended up for them working out. Yeah. It was not an ideal road that we took to get there, but we got there. So, not all bad.
Not all bad. The stories from the trenches, right? This is what real estate is really like. People that think it's all glamour and easy, that's they should participate in it for a day, and they'll have quite a different viewpoint.
Yeah, especially when we're looking at not your average, not a super turnkey home, but I've seen some pretty gnarly houses, and my clients will be shut. They'll be like, "You're going down there to the basement," and I was like, "Well, someone's got to go look." And
exactly.
You'll always catch me with my flashlight, looking behind the furnace for rodent droppings, or you'll always catch me trying to squeeze into a tiny space to see if there's any problems. Okay, so getting back on track, can you walk us through what happens from the moment an inspector arrives at the home? What does an inspection actually look like?
Yeah, for sure. So let's assume it's a buyer. Yeah. That's the scenario that most people are used to. So you've got a buyer. Hopefully the buyer is there. That's a really important part of it. Yeah. We really encourage the buyers to attend because it is this learning opportunity, learn about the house and hear firsthand, because the report is quite robust, which is good because 5 years from now, you're going to want to be able to go back to that report and it's going to have some details. But in the moment, we all know that buying a house can be a bit overwhelming. So it's really nice if you can actually be there, not just rely on the report, and hear firsthand from the inspector, not just what they're seeing, but what it means, right?
Absolutely.
Am I seeing that there appears to be some foundational cracks or something? Everyone hears that and goes, "Oh my gosh, a crack! What are we gonna do?" Yeah. Could be nothing, could be something, could require some follow up. So hearing that play out, and this is what I would suggest you do firsthand, is really, really helpful. It's really helpful too, of course, for the realtor to be there, because it's often the realtor after the fact that the consumer is saying, "Okay, what happened at this point? Can you remind me what he said there?" Yeah. Things like that. And just so everyone's hearing the same thing at the same time. So I feel really lucky that often that is, I'd say by and large, the realtor shows up, the buyer is there. So then the inspector is going to be one part inspector, one part educator for the rest of that inspection. So the inspector is going to do a thorough walkthrough of the home. There are 9 systems that they're looking at. It's not, sometimes people think that they're going to look at the quality of the upgrades or something, they're going to make some statements about this is hardwood versus luxury vinyl plank or something. They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They are looking at areas where systems might be failing, or where there might be down the road issues because there's a sign. So let's look at foundational cracks as an example. They're going to be looking at that. They are going to be getting on the roof if it's safe to do so. Sometimes they use drones if they can't physically get up on the roof. They're looking, of course, for wear and tear. We know that roofs are one of the more expensive items to fix in a home. Yeah. Water damage, if you have a leaky roof, very bad. So they want to make sure that that roof's in good order. And then they're going to be looking at plumbing, where they can see it. Reminder that inspectors don't go in behind the walls. Yeah. Homeowners would not take kindly to us coming in and drilling, punching holes in walls. So we don't do that.
Question for you though, just on the topic of plumbing, does Carson Dunlop offer an upgrade where they'll stick a camera down the main drain of the house?
It can be arranged. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay.
So if you want to scope out, absolutely can be done. Same with the looking for moisture, right?
Yeah.
If you think there's a
The
problem,
thermal
there's
imaging.
always additional things that can be done. And that's really important too, because sometimes you get a sense there's a problem. There's some indicia of a problem. So what can be done after that? And there's some guidance. If we're not the ones to do it, we can provide the guidance as to who can do it. That's helpful to the realtor and the consumer, because that consumer is going to turn back to the realtor and say, what do we do now?
Yeah, what do we do? Who do we
so
call?
it's very helpful to have a bit of a guidance on that. So we're looking at plumbing, we're looking at electrical, really important system of the home as well. We're looking at structure. Even in new homes, right, you're going to want to understand if there's anything that looks out of place. Like you've seen pictures online. There's lots of horror pictures online from inspections where, the walls aren't really lining up, is the way I would describe it.
Yeah, there's a newer built home in the East End. A friend of mine who's an agent, this house was across the street from her. So she was watching this house. It was listed, it was on the market forever, like brand new. She watched the house get built. And the whole time, anytime I was at her house, she would watch it and she's like, one day this house is going to fall down. Like she was just like, whatever it was, she did not feel like it was done well. Anyways, house, I don't remember if it sold and it was sold conditionally or what happened, but it sold. And buyers go in one day and there's literally water pouring out of the ceiling.
Terrible.
So safe to say that the deal did not go through.
Yes.
But yeah, that's just an example. Like new builds don't necessarily mean no problems.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. So I had a biased opinion about this before coming to Carson Dunlop.
Okay.
So the very first home I purchased was a new build.
Okay.
In this area, actually.
Oh, okay.
And it was lovely, but you could tell. You could tell that there were here and there some shortcuts, not across the board, but it was a sense I had. And wouldn't you believe it, that the cabinetry above the island in the kitchen, about 3 months after moving in, fell right down off the ceiling. Obviously wasn't installed properly, wasn't secured. I will say the builder handled it very well, but I was under the impression, and I think that I had bias because of my own personal experience, that new builds weren't as good as the homes built in the 50s or the 70s. But I've actually learned at Carson Dunlop that's not the case. It's just different. So there's lots of aspects of new construction that actually make new construction homes superior. And there's lots of aspects of older homes that make them stand the test of time. So it's not an all or nothing proposition. One isn't better than the other. There's a mixed bag. It goes back to why it doesn't really matter how old it is. You should really be making sure you're sort of looking under the hood, so to speak, because there can be a problem regardless.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that I really like about having buyers at inspections, like you said, is that most home inspectors will walk them through what they're seeing, and everyone has their own process. Sometimes we'll have inspectors who are not chatty and they just do their whole thing, come back, and then they'll be like, okay, like when they see something they want to show them, they'll call them over and be like, hey, come, I want to show you this. Sometimes they'll guide you through the way. Everyone's got their own process, but with each inspection, there's always kind of an end, like recap where they'll walk you through any potential problems, things that they noticed, and what they mean in simple terms, because the inspection, like you said, is very robust. Hard to understand if you don't have much experience with that kind of thing. And when you're there with the inspector, they can show you and be like, okay, this thing right here, this is a problem I'm worried about because this is a potential solution. Or I've seen plenty show buyers where the furnace filters are, where the panel is, how to turn the breaker off if need be, where the main water shutoff is. Like that is invaluable information that you can have as a buyer, and it's something that you don't actually get with a pre-list inspection because you don't necessarily walk through. That's right.
You get the report, which is great, but you don't get as much of that intel, which is very valuable, and it's a big part of where I actually see this industry going. We're very right now as an industry, moment in time, either you're selling or you're buying. But what happens next? Home ownership has changed. People have changed. The city of Toronto, in particular, larger urban centers in Canada, the demographics of home buyers have shifted. And there are a lot of people that do not have this knowledge. It's not like they're teaching it to us in school. So where would a home buyer learn about their home outside of having someone walk them through and provide some guidance? So there is a big opportunity, I feel, in the industry to aid homeowners through their journey when the dust has settled, when they're calm, they're not as stressed out, they're not as excited, they're just in the home doing their thing.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
What do they need to know about their home to ensure that they're doing the maintenance they need, to not incur a larger expense down the road, and what do they need to know just to maintain their home?
So kind of like a post-purchase walkthrough with an inspector, not necessarily a full-on inspection, but more so like for informational and educational purposes.
Yeah, like kind of like a health check, like a home health check.
Yeah. Interesting.
To get that understanding and to provide more education than aid in any sort of decision making, right? Because that's what the report is so often used for, aid in, do I feel good about my decision, or do I need to do any work before my house goes on the market?
Yeah.
This is, oh, okay, I've walked through this house now. I know more about it. I also know that I should be really clearing out these gutters every year, because this is going to cause me a water problem down the road if I'm not careful about this. Or I need to keep my eye or do some preventative work around the weeping around the home, because if we have a really big rainstorm, which we've been seeing a lot more in Toronto in recent years, my home's at risk. My home's at risk to have water coming inside, right? So that is really valuable information on a go forward basis once you're already inside the house.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it. I have lots of questions about what's going on in my basement, and no one has answers for me. So I would definitely take you up on that. If you like what you've been seeing so far, don't forget to hit subscribe and check out my other socials. So how long should a buyer or seller expect an inspection to take?
Anywhere from 1.5 to 2 hours, because again, that walkthrough, the more questions that a buyer has, the inspector will absolutely take those questions. They're not going to rush them out of there. Okay. And the rest of it's based on the square footage of the home. So again, we kind of work with the averages. Yeah.
What are some things that would be beyond the scope of what an inspector could do, or like things that you see buyers and sellers expecting to happen that do not?
The biggest one is being able to see through things, right? Like so there's some, like moisture meter is a good example. We talked about that already, that can tell you a little bit about what's happening, but inspections are visual inspections of what the inspector can see. So where they run into issues is, one, something might be behind a wall. And then also, and this is where a little bit of pre-work can really come in handy, particularly on the sell side. If there's a lot of furniture in the way, or the attic is inaccessible, as an example, the inspector just can't get up there. So really making sure that there's clear access to things like the panels, there's access to that attic. Like that really helps ensure you're getting the most out of the inspection.
I had the coolest experience with that, because we show up for our inspection. I was representing the buyers, and the seller had cleared out the entire walk-in closet.
That's amazing.
I know, so that we could get up to the attic, because, and I mean, it's beneficial to them too, because sometimes I've had an inspection where we opened the attic hatch, and I kid you not, a mountain of insulation fell out. Yeah. And if your closet is full, the insulation's getting all over your stuff. So it was very helpful to both sides.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's really great. I mean, if you know that a seller is coming to the table like that, you are feeling good about that transaction, right? So it's not a game, right? Let's not be a game of like, let's try to play hide and seek with what's going on. No, right? People want that transparency. They want to feel confident that the people they're working with on a deal, that this is going to be a good deal, both on the realtor side and the consumers themselves. So, no point in trying to hide. Something will come out in the wash eventually anyway, and it'll become a bigger problem down the road. That's where lawsuits and things like that come in. So totally. Great that they cleared out that closet.
Okay, so another question that kind of ties into that is like, have you seen cases where maybe something was missed during a home inspection?
On occasion.
And what kind of recourse would a buyer or a seller have if there was something, major that was missed in the inspection that would have typically fallen within the scope?
Yeah. So always we encourage, if there's any issues with our services, reach out, right? And I would say that would probably be a standard across the industry as well. Like if there's something that, someone feels was missed that should have been covered, talk to your inspector. I mean, that's not the luckily and thankfully not the majority of our calls by any stretch. A lot of our calls are, can you help explain this to me further? There's something in the report. Or, hey, the report says this, but now I've done some work. Can you update the report? Or could you come back? Sometimes there's coming back because you can't see everything. It's the middle of winter and there's good reason to want to come back. People do that a lot with swimming pools, right? They come back and when the weather's better, and that's often written to an agreement that, we're going to need to take a look at this pool when we can actually inspect the pool, right? And that's a different type of inspection, but a good example of just some things can't be done, weather dependent.
Yeah, totally. Well, I suppose another thing that we see, like in the winter, we can't test the AC necessarily. And same thing sometimes. Well, summer we can test the furnace, but really like wintertime, it's hard to test the AC because you can't run it in the winter. So I guess all that's to say there's no 100% guarantee. The inspection is great. It is very informative. It is absolutely necessary, but it's not going to tell you 100% of what's going on in the home. There will be things that are outside of the scope, and home ownership comes with a lot of bumps and obstacles, and sometimes you run it like with my house. The inspector missed that there wasn't a heat register in one of the rooms. I realized very quickly, and that was a problem for me, but there was nothing I could have done. There were a couple other small things that were missed, and it happens, and that's the cost of home ownership, right? Like there's always, it's never perfect.
Things definitely can happen. Missing something and then something happening are different, right? You'd hope that things aren't missed, and I mean, we don't just inspect, right? We at Carson Dunlop, we are the industry. We are the primary trainer of the industry in Canada. We are so passionate about education for the space. We offer an incredibly detailed education program around inspections. So we don't want there to be things that are ever missed. That's important to us. Understanding that people are human. I think education is really key on that point. When you're looking at something else, like the air conditioner is a great example, right? What an inspection is going to tell you, even in the winter, is how old approximately that AC is. And we can understand how long an appliance like that is typically going to last. So that would be noted in the report. If it's 15 years old, well, you're probably on some borrowed time there, right? That it's going to at some point go. It's a collective of things that consumers do. And this is why, as being a part of the industry, all the stakeholders are important, right? Realtors are incredibly important. Title insurance is important. Inspection is important because all of them work in conjunction. Like if you have something like that AC as an example, you're likely kind of have some representation that the appliances are in working order in your agreement, right? Unless you're buying it as is. So that if you get to closing date and that AC doesn't work, well, seller, you said it did, you warranted that it did. So there's some recourse there as well, right? And there's also products like warranty type products that can also provide a little bit of assistance. So nothing is perfect and nothing is foolproof. That is life, and absolutely homes require maintenance and upkeep costs. But there are some things that can be done. And as an industry working collaboratively to protect consumers, that's something we should all be getting our heads around.
Yeah, totally. And we talked about this earlier, but I just want to really make it clear for anyone who's watching or listening. An inspection is not meant to be pass-fail. It is not meant to be a deal killer. There is no need to fear an inspection. Right. The inspection, like the core purpose, is to understand what's going on in the home, and at least 60% of the purchases I've done this year have had some degree of remediation done after the fact, but that's never promised or guaranteed. Like I was able to negotiate some pretty substantial fixes for my clients a full plumbing upgrade. When we found Kitech plumbing, some electrical upgrades with aluminum wiring, but there's no promise. And potentially, if as the buyer, you are not comfortable with the level, like the accumulation of things that have been found, and the seller's not willing to do anything, you do have the option to walk away, but you can't go into an inspection with the mindset that every little thing that is found will be fixed by the seller, or that you automatically will get money off the price. It is not a given or a guarantee, and if that is the end all be all for you, you have to be prepared to walk away from the home.
Yeah, and there's definitely there's work to be done at the outset of that, right? And if your buyer is feeling that way, right, there's more going on there, right?
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming, right? The purchase of a home, the overall costs, the closing costs, a lot of these things that can't be financed. Sometimes people don't realize that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are swirling around the same time. So sometimes if the buyer is just not comfortable with the sum of the parts, then you're going to find that, they might say, this isn't for me. Maybe just buying the home at this time, or this particular home, or this vintage of home. This is too much work. Who knows, right? There's all different fact scenarios that come out of day-to-day experiences as a realtor. I would say, by and large, someone who's made an offer on a home, particularly in Toronto, where it is really such a goal for people to be able to buy a home, if they've made an offer on the home, the last thing they want to do is not buy that home. Yeah. And we see that play out in our numbers. Like, we don't see our inspection acting as deal color. We don't. Yeah. We absolutely see it as acting as information. It can aid in a negotiation if that's something that needs to happen because the problems are big enough that they need to be addressed monetarily. But generally speaking, you got two willing parties, and what you're trying to do is facilitate a transaction where no one at the end of the day feels they didn't get what they paid for. They understand what they have, and they're happy, right? They're happy with the service they got. They're going to share that I had a great experience working with you and then working with those other service providers.
I also personally believe that there is some burden on the realtor to explain that to the buyer going into the transaction. And, every time I go through an inspection clause with my clients, I explain to them that there's no promise that you will get anything if something is found. So we have to go into it with that expectation. And if something comes of it and we ask and they say yes, amazing. If you don't ask, the answer will always be no, but there's no promise it'll be a yes either. So I think that we really do hold a big role in that, because we have to set that expectation for them. And if we don't, the information you find online is crazy. I do periodically surf Toronto Real Estate Reddit, and some of the advice I see on there is crazy. People feel very strongly that all sorts of directions, but you can't just read that and then assume that that's the standard. You know what I mean?
That's right. And there's a mixed bag of professionalism. There's a mixed bag of knowledge. It's very difficult, right? And it's why it's so important to put yourself out there with thought leadership, with knowledge for consumers, so they can see here is an expert. Here is a real expert who's going to help guide me in this process. I think you really nailed it, that the realtor is the chief expectation setter across the board, from the purchase price for the buy side, that's setting that sell price on the sales side, through to every aspect of the transaction where the headaches, the pitfalls lie. It's not easy. They say moving is one of the most stressful things you can do in life, for good reason. It's not the easiest process. So really a huge part of the realtor job is that setting and navigating through those expectations.
Yeah, totally. I really want to talk about the age of homes.
Sure.
So how do you find the challenges differ, based on different home ages? So, in Toronto, we have several eras of build. We have kind of the Victorian era, the late 1800s, early 1900s. Then we hit kind of the 50s, 70s. Where what are some core challenges that we see with each era of home?
Yeah. So when you get into those historical homes, the really old homes, beautiful. Gorgeous homes in Toronto, a lot of that can come down to things like knob and tube. There's less of that now than there was. A lot of work has been. There was a time where I think when people were getting excited about redoing Victorians, where knob and tube was just all over the place, right? And it's a problem everywhere. It's a problem for mortgages. It's a problem for title insurance. It's a problem for home insurance. Big red flag problem. Got to get fixed. So I think a lot of people have done that work, but still there, still exists. That's a big one that has to get taken care of if you're going to proceed. There's also issues that can be issues around plumbing. Anything that's really old. You think of an old Victorian home on a beautiful old street in Toronto with big leafy trees in the front. Sometimes the roots of those trees can be a little problematic, cause some problems in the home.
Stick a hole right through that drain.
Right?
Yeah.
So that water can be a problem. Water damage could be a problem.
Yeah. I just want to clarify, for anyone who does not know what knob and tube is, it is an old form of electrical.
That's right. It's a wiring.
Yeah. Yes, wiring. And if you are looking at older homes, sometimes you'll see the remnants, the old knobs.
That's right.
But then you see that there's not wires going through them. So
yeah, so that is okay, right? As long as, so people get freaked out when they see that too, but as long as it's been rectified, you don't want to
pop the knob out of
it's okay, right? Asbestos too is another one. That's not Victorian era. That's going to be a bit newer.
Yeah. Now we're kind of moving into like 70s.
Exactly.
So they loved asbestos in the 70s.
Yeah. A lot of these things were new, innovative things at the time that just proved to be problematic for various reasons. Asbestos is an issue for health reasons. Mm-hmm. Some other issues were just around longevity of the product. And the product would fail. Yeah. So asbestos, that one could be a problem, especially if you move it, right? Like asbestos is not a problem until you touch it. If you lift it up and the particles are moving around. Yeah. Again, able to remediate. Like none of the problems in any of the homes can't be fixed. They can all be fixed.
Totally. And I think asbestos is one that I find buyers particularly they see or hear asbestos and they freak out. Yeah. And like you said, asbestos is not terrible if it is not disturbed.
That's right.
So if you have asbestos in your vents, not ideal. Yeah. If you have asbestos ceiling tiles, a little bit better because the odds of them getting hit, disturbed, anything like that are low. Yes. And it's more so informational that if you decide to get rid of that drop ceiling, you need to do it through a company that is like, that is their specialty, that they can deal with it. So asbestos is one that I really just want to make clear that it is not necessarily something that you won't be able to get home insurance because of. It is just something that you really need to be aware of if it is either in a place that might be disturbed or if you intend on doing any work, you really want to test.
Exactly. And it's the age of that home tends to be where we see a lot of people saying, oh, we're going to renovate this. It's not Victorian, right? It's not like, let's keep this in its beautiful state. It's a home that likely has some signs of wear and tear, and you might want to make that a bit more modern. So you will disturb it when you go through your renovations, and you need to budget that into your renovations, that there's a specific way to remove it, and make sure you do realize that it's there. Really important before you start DIYing, and then all of a sudden
into the wall.
Exactly. So that's a big one. Things like insulation too. I mean, this is unlocking a core childhood memory for me, right? That cold wall that your bed was up against because you lived in like a 50s, 60s bungalow.
My walls do not have any insulation.
There was a long stretch of time where insulation just didn't seem to have the level of importance that it has today. Energy efficiency and just, different building standards, quality of build, things change, insulation techniques change.
Totally. Yeah.
So lack of insulation, that can create mold problems. Yep. So that's a big one, right? You're feeling cold walls in a house. Yeah. That would suggest that you could end up with, or you could already have some mold issues.
Combined with lack of ventilation if you don't have proper ventilation in the attic. Yeah. Another one that I see a lot, and I don't know what it is this year, but this year has been like the era of post-war homes for me. That is all, like 80% of what I've been showing, I swear are like 50s, 60s, 70s builds. And most of them have aluminum wiring. Yeah. Very few that I've seen this year have had the wiring like
Upgraded. Yeah.
And aluminum wiring can also be an issue with insurance.
Yep.
And there is, which I've learned through this year, like very specific ways that you can kind of handle it. So when we find it, we'll do an electrical inspection. Electrical inspector will make recommendations. Potentially everything is already safe. There have been some upgrades done kind of on the, what I've been told is the issue is like at the connector. So at the outlet, there needs to be some sort of converter. I don't know exactly the details. I'm not an expert, but we'll do that. And then if any fixes are done, then we would get an ESA, Electrical Safety Authority certificate that that kind of states all the work was done, is done properly, and then there isn't an issue with insurance. But that is something I've been seeing a lot of, and I don't think people realize how significant a cost that might be.
Yes, it can be if it's the whole home.
Yeah.
And think of where electrical lives. It's all behind the walls.
Yep.
So
And then those walls maybe have asbestos.
could be, right? Exactly. So there's
Perfect
some
storm.
cascading aspects to that again, it's just knowledge, right? To make sure that if it's still the home you love, that you're going to proceed and be able to get those fixes done and in accordance with the budget you had in mind. And like I said, by and large, people are they're trading these homes. These are hot ticket homes.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're not sellable or people are less interested. They just need to understand.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Another big one that I see a lot, specifically with condo townhouses, because that was a time and era that they were built a lot. Early 2000s is Kitech plumbing. Yeah. You knew.
Yeah.
And
that's still no, it's UFI that's in the actual agreement. I was like, Kitech's
UFI
not
is
in the boilerplate agreement.
It should be.
At this point
it should be. For anyone who doesn't know what Kitech is, it is a type of plumbing and that was used very commonly early 2000s into the maybe 2010ish before they not quite.
I'd say a little shorter, but yes, for a good enough period of time that it's out there. Yes.
Yeah. So anytime I see something that's like really in the kind of early 2000s, the first thing I'm doing when I'm entering, whether it's a condo or a townhouse, is I'm like up behind all the plumbing, looking for those orange and blue pipes. And the issue with Kitech, correct me if I'm wrong, is there's something with the fittings that they've essentially now it's doomed to fail, and when it fails, it will be a problem.
It would be my favorite failure example. So less of a like a safety concern, like we talked about with asbestos. This is a failure issue. You're going to end up with a plumbing issue. You need to get those pipes replaced.
Yeah,
and the extensiveness of the Kitech could be throughout, could be not throughout.
Yeah.
That's going to generate the cost associated with the
and it's
switch.
not an inexpensive thing to fix. This was one that my clients purchased, a condo townhouse, and I had a feeling based on the age there might be Kitech. The listing agent didn't know what Kitech was. And I had to explain the severity. And when we did the inspection, found the Kitech, I was like, I'm sorry, but this has got to go. And they offered, a monetary, like they offered to take some money off the price. But I was like, my clients don't want to deal with this renovation. Like they did it. It was good. But Kitech is really one that we need to be aware of.
Definitely, and that will be found on an inspection.
Oh yeah,
certainly.
Big time.
So again, getting ahead of it, and wouldn't it have been great that if the listing agent had that done in advance and known, then they could have had a completely different strategy in terms of how they were going to sell that townhouse.
My favorite response I get from listing agents is that they'll tell their seller about a problem, and the seller goes, "But it was fine for me." I've had that so many times this year with the wiring, with the Kitech. They're like, but it's fine. I haven't had a problem with the plumbing, so it's okay. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Yeah. When it's a problem, it's a big problem. Yes. So we're going to have to, we got to deal with it.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, exactly. Luckily, though, it's again back to consumer setting expectations and consumer education. These are all hot button issues. None of these, if you Google, none of these are going to be considered minor, right? There's lots written about the failure of Kitech as an example.
Oh, yeah, big time.
So, a little bit of research and it will help set that expectation, but just not as ideal to be doing it once someone's already fallen in love with a unit and now they have to decide, are they going to take on a big renovation project or not? Yeah.
And to kind of wind things down, I'd love to know, why Carson Dunlop? Why... I'm a buyer, I'm a consumer, I'm trying to pick my inspection company. Why am I going with Carson Dunlop?
We really pride ourselves on being the absolute best in the space in terms of the level of professionalism, the detail of the reports. It's very special in our minds that it's not just an inspection company, but it is the company that developed this industry in Canada. We are the trainer of the industry. We've got software as a backbone to the industry. We really are not just the service provider, but we are the standard of the industry. So when you hire Carson Dunlop, you are hiring the standard of the industry, and you're getting someone who's seen a lot. We've been in business for over 45 years. So we've seen a lot in homes. We've seen every generation of home that we've spoken about today. So there's not a lot that's going to phase us. There's not a lot that we can't be solutions oriented on, right? It's one thing to point out a problem. It's another thing to say, and this is how you can go about addressing it, because that's really, at the end of the day, what's going to move a deal forward.
Yeah, you can give me a list of problems, but if I'm a buyer and this is my first home, I'm not going to know how to solve any of them. I'm going to have to go to Google. So having that knowledge is really invaluable.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, Carson Dunlop operates Canada-wide?
From a franchise perspective, yes. Our corporate store, as we like to call it, operates out of Toronto. So all the GTA is covered. We've got a very large inspection team. So we don't say no. We can get there quickly. Fast turnaround times throughout the GTA for those that are in Toronto. And that for those that are not, simply check our website, and we likely have someone who can serve you in another community within Canada.
Where does Carson Dunlop see itself in the journey for buyers, sellers, and agents?
So we really see ourselves as a partner, recognizing that there is a moment in time for both the sell side and the buy side where this really makes sense, and you need it. And you need it now. Like we're fully versed in the fact that conditions ride on this for buyers, and that sellers are looking to get their homes on the market. So when we're doing a pre-listing inspection, we're not going to be the holdup. We want to help you get to market too. So that's where we fit in the selling and buying journey. We're there when you need us for exactly what you need. Outside of that, we do see ourselves as a partner to the homeowner. So at any point in time during the home ownership journey, we can offer unbiased, trusted advice about what's happening in your home, where things might be on the verge of failing, where things might need some repair. It's a little different than having someone come in from a particular trade or company. If you call someone in to inspect your roof because you think something might be wrong, they're likely going to recommend you do something with the roof. Yeah. Whereas if you call in a home inspection company, we're able to, assess everything at once, right, in terms of those major systems of the home. And we're able, again, to be unbiased because we're not the ones that are going to fix your roof. Yeah. So if you go ahead or not go ahead, that's your concern. We just want to make sure you're armed with that knowledge.
Do you have any final parting words? Anything else you want to add?
I think we're in a really interesting time for both good and bad with what's happening. One of the areas where I think in Toronto in particular, we're going to see more issues is around water. I think water is a huge issue for homes. I think we're so densely populated at this point that we are struggling to keep up with major storms. So if I had some advice for where consumers could take action to help prevent damage, catastrophe in their homes, it would be around water. Do everything you can to prevent water damage. So that's from roof right down to basement, to inserting the backflows that help prevent the water from coming back up, scoping your drains to make sure the trees aren't in them, ensuring that the surrounding of the home is, you're preventing as much to the extent you can water from getting in there. Water is going to continue to be a big issue, and it's going to continue to be a big issue that's going to have a trickle effect into insurance, and it's going to affect the saleability of homes, certainly, right? Of how waterproof and weatherproof is your home. I think that goes really hand in hand with climate concerns and just
Absolutely.
general resiliency concerns, I think we're going to see homeowners be a lot more focused on climate friendliness in homes, like how efficient a home is,
Yeah.
not just from a dollar perspective, but also
Absolutely.
so that we don't keep compounding this problem
Yeah.
through the use of our homes. And then also the resiliency of materials. Like winds are stronger, rain is stronger,
Yeah.
hail is a problem. Like things that we didn't think about as much, particularly in Toronto.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of focus, not just on renovation, but renovation for resiliency going forward.
I like that. I like that. That was one of the number one things when I was buying this home that attracted me to it, was that the basement's waterproofed and I have a sump pump.
Yeah.
Because I am in a high flood area.
For sure.
And it's necessary, and I haven't, like, knock on wood, had any plumbing, water penetration issues, but it's inevitable in Toronto. I remember when I was a kid, my mom's basement would flood frequently, and we'd literally be down there during rainstorms with buckets trying to get all the water out.
Yeah. It's common, and it's becoming more common. And we're not a city where people aren't utilizing their basement space. I mean, we are living in smaller homes.
Yes,
and they're beautifully done. People are investing a lot of money. So it's about protecting your investment, and the heartache that comes with a flooding event in a home is not a nice experience. So definitely an area to watch and to try to do everything you can to prevent.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I really appreciate you coming on.
It was such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.